everybody, it is Romania Black, and I'm not going to lie, I have waited until the last minute to record this. We're on episode 11, the penultimate episode of the summer Hikaru died, and yeah, I usually record this over the weekend, and then I didn't feel good, and I was like, it's the penultimate episode, I am not recording until I am 100%, and here I am, 100% ready to go and talk about what we're going to get in this episode. Probably Yoshiki talking to his dad, but we're going to see how that goes down and what we find out with that. Last episode was called Truth, so hopefully we get a little bit more with this episode. But anyway, we have some comments that I want to talk with you all about, and I have done some thinking about what I want to do involving the manga. I haven't looked at the comments for episodes 10 on Patreon and 9 on YouTube respectfully yet. I'm waiting for my mods to clear those. But I do want to go ahead and talk based on a couple comments that I've got here with my plans and my ideas and see if you are excited about those or think they are good ideas. So, Felix F. Crow, 23 for episode 8, said, I just wanted to say that a behind the scenes for this anime is releasing. Part 3 came out a few days ago in both the Katakawa channel and the official Summer Hikaru Died English Global channel. Both have English subs. I would love for you to react to those after you finish the series. And then Generation Wumbo added to that saying, about reading the manga, I imagine this will get a second season when the manga finishes, so maybe in 2 years, since it's a big seller in Japan. Still, I would like to see you read at least the extras from the manga if you get the chance. They have a surprising amount of cool stuff that will never ever get adapted, such as AUs, gags, some interesting thematic conversations between the boys, etc. Look, I'll be honest with you all. I'm kind of a masochist when it comes to being with anime only. I know some people, they watch a series and when it's over, they're like, I have to read the manga now. And you are valid and I respect you and I am all for your decision to do that. But I'm not going to lie, I get kind of a little bit of an adrenaline rush waiting for the anime, even if it takes 2 to 3 years, waiting for the anime to get done and then the buildup of it coming out and then it coming out and watching it week to week. There's just something so exciting about that and the hype, and I'm kind of sold on that. So I definitely want to stay anime only for Summer Hikaru Died because I think they will make a second season. However, I do want to look at the manga up until the end of season 1. And all the gags and everything Generation Wumbo is talking about. And I would like to see the behind-the-scenes stuff that Felix F. Crow talks about in their comments. So here's my plan. I've already got a show that won the poll that's going to come out. There's going to be a week break between episode 12 and the new show coming out, which I'm really excited about the new show. So I don't want to delay that any longer. But I do have, I'll talk about that in the November update video on the channel. I do have some time in November and December where there's going to be a little break in the middle of the week on my channel. I'll talk about it then. But I'm thinking, and you all can chime in down below if you think this is a good idea, in November and December, maybe having it to where I have manga reactions. I'm going to do volume 1 next week at the end of the episode. I'm going to do volume 1. We're going to test it out there to see what that's like. But the other volumes and the behind the scenes stuff, maybe in November and December, splitting that up and doing it those 2 months, looking at the manga and looking at the behind the scenes. Does that sound like a plan that could work? If it does, chime in down below and let me know what you think. And if that would be cool for you. October is a packed month anyway, and I want to give people some time to catch up with the anime series before diving into all the extras. So that was kind of my reasoning behind waiting till November and December. So you all let me know down below what you would like. I like a good manga reaction and review, so we'll see. So yeah, Generation Wumbo also says, the thing about Hikaru saying, I found a place to belong, or I belong, is that he's not talking about the village in which he admits internally he doesn't really care about. He's calling back to him, telling Yoshiki that he is home when Hikaru gave Yoshiki half of himself, which I find cute because we cut to Yoshiki, who presumably gets the reference. I love that too. I love the idea of Hikaru, the place he belongs is with Yoshiki. I love that as well. So then we have Kaylin V for episode 7 who says, the inversion of Yoshiki's eyes getting more and more dull and shadowed instead of the typical trope where they light up with hope. Jesus Christ. And I told Kaylin V, I'm like, I want to give Yoshiki a hug and a hope because I think the fact that he's emo adds to it and adds to the factor if he just gets more gloomy. And I'm like, I just want to give you a hug and I want to give you hope. And just, I feel so bad for him, but that made me laugh, Kaylin V. Moomin says, Totoros are forest spirits. Which, check out my October update video, and there may be some more talk about Totoro there. Rook, for episode 9, says, I love the conversation where Yoshiki says, staring at Hikaru's body doesn't affect him now. I totally get the cynicism of worrying it's a no homo moment, but I feel it's much more of a yes queer moment. Like you said, I think it's something that clicks easier with queer people. It's very common in queer relationships to have dynamics that are difficult to define. It's also common in queer relationships where each person involved has a different sexuality and can't entirely relate to the other person. Gay, bi, straight, bi, etc. In this case, it feels to me like a gay ace dynamic, which is super interesting and not something I've seen in media before. And it's really cool to see it explored. Well, unless in Death Note, if you count Light and L, but not gonna go there. Anyway, they said, like Yoshiki says, sometimes it comes down to we have our own thing and leaving it just outside of what people traditionally put into words. It's a very queer experience. And I also love the scene as it doubles as a way to emphasize that Yoshiki is seeing Hikaru as his own person now and not just a reflection of the OG Hikaru. I love that too. I love that Yoshiki is seeing Hikaru as something that's not just his friend that died. He is its own entity. Also, as someone on the ace spectrum, I love the concept of talking about how relationships are not easily defined. My friends and I went on a vacation this last summer, and it was my best friend who is a woman and one of my really close friends who's a guy. And we were debating, and we had this moment where we looked at each other because none of us are in relationships. I'm on the ace spectrum. My best friend, she's heterosexual. And my guy friend, I don't know. I don't question, but I'm assuming they're heterosexual. And so we were all talking about like where to stay and what to do. And we, for a brief moment, were like, well, do we get 2 rooms? And then we were like, no, we're in our 30s and we're adults. Like, just get 1 room and split it 3 ways. And I remember that, again, I'm from a very rural, traditional location. I was telling my family and they were like, you're staying in a room with a guy. And I was like, yeah, we're in our 30s. It's okay. I think we're going to be fine with it. But it's just that idea of like this show subverting that traditional concept of relationships and recognizing that it's so much more complex than what media often defines as. And I love that. Queer, yes, queer, indeed. Rinth, for episode 9, just to finish off with them, said, the most impactful moment for me so far is the scene where Yoshiki tells Hikaru, we've got our own thing. We don't got to follow the rules. It's so blatantly queer in a way that queer people can connect with and understand. To be queer is to break out of those traditional relationships, whether it be aro-ace, same-sex, etc. And I think this show did a really good job of putting it in its own words. Our own thing. I also think the scene where Yoshiki is ruffling Hikaru's hair and making a promise to himself to try to find a place where they can be free, it feels so reminiscent of that scene at the river where Yoshiki and Hikaru were kids, and the original Hikaru offered Yoshiki a safe place. The whole talk of just going back to the mountain to make things easier is reminiscent of going back into the closet. Yeah, I love that idea of each of them giving each other a safe space, and hopefully that works out for them. Hopefully it works out for them. We'll see. But yeah, I'm excited, y'all. I cannot believe we're already at the penultimate episode. But anyway, I have talked enough. We are ready to dive into episode 11 of Summer Hikaru Died. We're supposed to be asking for the dad, Yoshiki's dad, for help. And maybe last episode was truth. This episode, maybe we're going to get a little bit more about Yoshiki's dad's relationship with Hikaru's dad. So maybe we'll get a Brokeback Mountain episode. I don't know. But anyway, thank you all so much for your comments, for your kind words and support. We are going to start episode 11 of The Summer Hikaru Died, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. Why is it that when Yoshiki finally decides that he's fine, he's figured things out, he's excited about research, this is when Hikaru or eldritch monster, Nonuki, whatever, decides that he's going to have an emo moment. Oh my God. The worst part Is. And I feel like, okay, I'm going to try not to jinx it, and so I'm knocking on wood as I say this, but to me, having watched shows where they are manga bait, and they're just going to be one season, and then they expect you to read the manga, and they're never coming back to it again, a lot of them will try to rush a lot of events leading to the finale, and this series does not seem to be doing that. Instead, they are setting up a cliffhanger, which I'm excited about, because them setting up the cliffhanger, knock on wood, side game, use that, race and horse money, means that they're probably going to do a season 2. Which is fine. I'm glad for that. I'm happy for that. But it's gonna suck if we have a big cliffhanger next week. The scene where Hikaru is grabbed by Yoshiki, I don't know if you've watched Skate the Infinity or not, but that felt like an episode 7 moment. And I was like, no, there are no dancing palm trees. No. I was like, no. Could you imagine this series of dancing palm trees? Could you imagine? Go watch Skate the Infinity if you have no clue what I'm talking about. You'll find out. But man, they packed a lot into this episode, but at the same time, it all felt like setup. It felt like we got some answers, we got some discussions that were important and needed to happen, but this all felt like setup. This felt like, honestly, this felt like we're getting to the end of Act 2, not to the season finale. Because if you know, like, the 3-act structure, let's talk about that just briefly. In Western literature, it's often a 3-act structure, right? Where you have the first act, the second act, and the third act, right? And typically in a 3-act structure, you have your beginning where you introduce the characters, your middle where conflict and things happen, and the third act where things kind of like work around, you get your climax, you get your resolution. Typically, if it's a drama, your second act, the middle, ends with your characters at their lowest points, if you're going to go that route. And then the third act is about building everything back up and getting everything back in. If you're going that route, then we're setting things up to be at their lowest point, where Yoshiki doesn't have all the answers in time, and Hikaru's feeling dejected and feeling so horrible about himself and doesn't know what to do. And that's leading next week to be this, like, end of Act 2 curtain drop, and it's like, now you have an intermission of probably years before you find out the resolution. It's like, no! So, which is so deceptive. That ED makes it seem like, when we first got the ED, I was like, oh, well, it'll end with them going to the ocean. No, I don't think that's where it's going to end. That's maybe the end goal later on, but not now. So, in a 4-act structure, which is in a lot of Eastern literature, like Japanese literature, you have your opening act, which is kind of like Act 1 in the 3-act structure. You're introducing your characters. Do that, what you will. Then you have Act 2, which is your conflict. Now, the conflict, I fully believe that Summer Hikaru died as a 4-act structure, and I feel like we're getting to, like, the halfway point, end of Act 2 with next week, and I'm like, but why are you doing this show? So, and then Act 3 is called, it's a turn in Eastern literature, where you have your conflict is set up, things are getting really bad. Act 3 is when you find out, it's called the turn, and you discover the extra truths, because there's something that's not right about all of this. Something is missing. Something's not adding up. Something's not being told. We need to figure out what that is. And I don't think we're going to figure it out this season. And we're going to have to figure it out later. And that's frustrating. But I feel like in Act 3, that's when the ultimate truth comes out. The real turning point hits. And then Act 4 is the climax and the resolution and what we do with that. I feel like we are going to end this season with the first 2 acts out of the way, and we're going to need a season 2 to resolve everything else. Yay! And then you get to wait, and I'm not ready for that. But I could be wrong. And then next week could jam a whole bunch of stuff in, but I hope it doesn't, because that would feel unnatural and out of place. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, those are my thoughts going into that. I do want to talk about the dad. So the dad has his own room. I'm not going to relationship shame any family, because some people are happily married and sleep in separate bedrooms because the partner snores really loudly or are disruptive, or they just want their own space. You know, we cannot label families. We cannot confine them to a little box. I feel that a lot. I feel like some people, especially where I live, because I'm in a very rural conservative area, it's like the nuclear family. And no, it's 2025. No, even back in the 1800s, there were happily married families that they're like, we need our own bed. I need my own space. I don't want to be smothered in my sleep. So it's understandable the dad and the mom have separate bedrooms, but also it is very indicative. What's interesting about the dad is the dad's not a bad guy. The mom has different thoughts, but he has a photo of his family on his dresser. If this were his own space and he didn't want to, if this were his own space and he didn't want to think about his wife, he probably would just have a picture of his kids. But he has her included, And so that's when Yoshiki's like, hey, can I talk to you? And we'll get past this OP. I was surprised there was a lot of OPED imagery in this episode, but it is the penultimate episode. So the Ultraman reference is there with Ultron Man, and the Godzilla reference is there, and Yoshiki is a certified monster lover. But there's so much you can do. You can make the joke. The obvious joke is that Yoshiki's a monster fucker. That's the joke. That's the BL joke you can make. But it's so beyond that, right? Because for the monster, you have to think of, in terms of monster and the fact that Yoshiki wants to research them, that adds a whole dynamic of why Hikaru fascinates him and why he's been okay with it. We see he's had this in the background of his being from a young age. So why he's not only okay with Hikaru, but letting him exist, wanting him to thrive, like that all checks out now, right? But the idea of this is not only tied to Yoshiki's own identity, it's tied to his identity. Because he's queer. Yoshiki's gay. So for him, he's like, when he says, why can't the monsters and the people get along? It's a veiled reference to being like, he's like, I identify with the monster. Yoshiki's like, I identify with the monster because it's othered. I feel othered because I don't fit in with the Ultron Man people that are around me. I feel like a monster because I'm different. And my identity is different than these other people. And I just want us all to accept each other. And wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? It really would. But it's like Yoshiki's identity is tied to that of a monster. So he relates. He wants them to have a place to belong as well. He doesn't like them being othered or targeted or persecuted. But also, I kind of like the idea that when he's talking about researching, it's kind of like, him talking about queer studies. Which, that's just the nerdy academic in me. But I was like, go for it, Yoshiki. Go for it. I don't know the market of queer studies jobs in Japan, but go for it. But yeah, so we have this scene. We have the watermelon being eaten. The episode's called Endo's Sin. And then, so the dad brings up the farmer's head. I mean, here's the thing. The mountain is Hikaru's face, like his smile and everything. Somebody had pointed out on Twitter, I did see a post, because I've tried to tag things, but you know how that works on Twitter. Sometimes things sneak out. But somebody had put a picture of Hikaru and Hikaru next to each other, and they're both smiling. The smile is different, which is cool. So you can tell the difference between OG Hikaru and current entity Hikaru based on their smile, which is cool. I like the difference there. It's a nice little subtle... The animation team knows what it's doing, and it does little subtle things with the animation from the manga that I really like. So yeah. So the farmer's head. I honestly, considering how many fairy tale books were in this episode, I appreciate that Yoshiki is studying classical art, but he might want to go back to that farmer's head book because there might be something in there, the Kubutachi tale. So it looks like, a man praying to the mountain to not lose his head, essentially is what it looks like. He's like, it's an old Kubutachi folk tale. I like they have their own publishing company that are publishing these stories. I heard this story a lot when I was a boy. And I don't blame Yoshiki for not wanting to hear the story. He's like, can I just play with these toys, Dad? Could you come back at a better time to get me this? I like that he spit out the watermelon seeds, because I wonder if this happened before or after the Hikaru incident with the watermelon. He's like, I like the monster guys better. They're so cool looking, but how'd they always get defeated? Right? The human and monsters should all sign a peace treaty. And he's just like, oh, he's like, I'm going to be a monster expert and do tons of research on them. Which is super cute. And he's like, here, don't win. Oh, and he asked the dad to like face him, but to let him win the fight. To me, I'm like, no, I want Yoshiki to win. I want him to be successful, and I want him to be able to be with Hikaru. I honestly think the solution is, if Hikaru and Yoshiki have to leave the town, they have to leave the town. But I think the answer of where Hikaru belongs is with Yoshiki. I don't think it's a specific place. I think it's with Yoshiki. And I think that there's going to be a lot of come to Jesus, come to Nonuki moments of figuring out, like, how do we make this work? How do we handle this? I think there needs to be a lot of discussion about that. I like in this anime too, all the little details, like the gnome, the little frog that feels like over the garden wall, honestly. All the stuff in the DVD case, like, I love that. And then we cut to the same area, the same scene on the ledge with the flowers. It's the exact same, but now it's the two of them as adults, and instead of playing together, there is this separation and there is this boundary between them, and their backs are to each other. And honestly, there's a part of me that wonders if the dad knows that Yoshiki's gay, and he's telling him, he's like, don't be like me. I feel like there's multiple layers to that saying, don't be like me. He's like, he doesn't want Yoshiki to be gay like him because it's going to isolate him and make him not feel like he belongs. But also, there's another layer to that where he doesn't want Yoshiki to be weak like him. He's like, you have your mom's strength and her kindness. Like, that makes you better than me. So don't become like I am, where you're just settling. But also, he's like, I wish you weren't like me because it's going to make life harder for you. And so there's so many layers to that, and I love it. But it's really sad that as kids, him and his dad were on the same level playing, but after puberty and maybe the dad realizing how Yoshiki is, and Yoshiki maybe realizing how he is, but doesn't know his dad's the same, it put up this barrier between them, and it's really, really sad. Also, I think it's interesting that there were once morning glories outside the window in the garden, and now there are these red flowers that I don't know what they are, so that's interesting. And then, yeah, they don't normally talk, but now he's like, I need to know about Hikaru's dad. And he's like, what about him? What did the Endo family do? What was their sin? And he's like, well, who told you about that? And it's like, that's not important. Yeah, what were those flowers? What are these red Japanese flowers? I want to know different kinds. They're not spider lilies. There's something else that are interesting. They look like little bell flowers. I'm trying to figure out exactly what they are. They're not it. Put a little bell on it. Yeah. There's a platycodon, which is interesting, a balloon flower. Trying to figure out. Oh, I hate that it won't just immediately show me what they are. They're not spider lilies, though. There's something else. Someone in the comments will tell me what kind of flower this is so I can look it up alongside the other ones. What was the platy one? The platycodon. Known as, interesting. A species of herbaceous flower, perennials, balloon flowers. Do they have any symbolism? Cultural, Not really. Anyway, y'all will tell me down below. But I hate the two of them are back to back like that. I want them to work together and understand each other. He said, we never wanted our sons to carry that burden. One thing I really like about this anime and this series is that Kohei, who is Hikaru's dad, does not look entirely like his dad. Like, they have the same eyes, they have the same white hair, and their facial structure is kind of the same, but Hikaru takes a lot after his mom. Like, the way that his face is shaped, his, like, hair that's fluffier, like, all that. He takes more after his mom in some respects than the dad, and I think that's kind of cool. I like that they're not just carbon copies, and just kind of like Yoshiki takes after the mom as well. I like that. I like that between them. He's like, I want to hurry up and marry Yuki. He's like, well, you've been rejected. Now you're just being a creep. He's like, we're pressured to hurry up and marry someone special. So, and he's like, why is that? He's like, well, ages ago, there was a young Endo family head whose wife died of some disease and became an okubi. What is an okubi? It's a huge female head. Okay. It has the characteristics of a married woman's teeth painted black. Their vengeful spirits and obsessions turned into a yokai. Interesting. I wonder if it's, in most accounts, they are female. I'm curious. We're going to get into this. So the Endo family thing is that one Endo family guy, his wife became this okubi, which is this flying head spirit yokai, which they're on the head part of the body. So that kind of makes sense, right? It says okubi are Japanese monsters in folklore meant to satirize monks who broke their precepts. Interesting. There's a story in Totai Bukairoku, a collection of monster stories in the mid-Edo period. When the protagonist opened his storage room one day, he saw a huge old woman's face. It was weird, and he called it Okubi's yokai, or the monster with the giant head. He poked the giant face with tongs, but the Okubi didn't respond. When he touched it with his hands, it felt sticky. It has the ability to make people sick. In the mid-Edo period, haiku poet Hori Bakusui wrote about Okubi in his works. Interesting. It was the night after the rain when the moon came out, and with the sound of thunder, an okubi about 2 meters high appeared at the top of a wall. It blew on someone, and the part that touched by the breath immediately turned yellow and swollen. Later, the doctor prescribed a medicated bath to cure it. It says the image of okubi who appeared in Japanese manga and anime appear as the villain monsters in other works and blah, 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 blah. Interesting. Okay. So I wonder if the family head, I feel like there's more to it. I feel like something's missing from that story about the okubi of just, she died of some disease. And then, but it's also said the okubi bring about sickness, which I'm wondering if that ties to the disease, the plague that was going around the area at the time. It feels like something's missing from the story. Also, I like the fact that the dad and son, Hikaru and his dad, both like the shiitake manju. He's like, that's when it all started. And I like that. I like that Yoshiki's dad's kind of like Yoshiki and like, yes, tell me more. Okay. The family head was trekked up the mountain to offer his wife's head. But do you want to guess what he asked for? He said, bring my wife back to life. I'll bring you anybody else's head as long as they're not from the Endo family. So that was what's interesting is he made this request saying, if you bring her back to life, if you bring her back, I'll trade anyone non-family. I'm wondering if there's something else on this land that's causing all of this, and it's not Hikaru. Because Hikaru doesn't remember any of this happening. He's like, I don't know what was going on. I don't know. You would think as an entity, even in a body of a human, you would think even if his memories are suppressed, he would remember something to do with this. But he's like, I don't know what was going on. So it feels like there was something else causing all this, but Hikaru's getting the blame for it. Right? And so it felt like a Full Metal Alchemist thing where the head's brought back to life. But I'm wondering, it said, but at the very same day, a third of the village died somehow or another. Some hanged themselves, some beheaded their families and committed suicide. I'm wondering if instead of her being brought back to life, this yokai had already inhabited her, and maybe he allowed some of the impurities to come in and attack the other people, and they were all possessed at the same time. And because the village just didn't understand what was going on fully, they thought that she was brought back to life by Nonuki. But what the reality was this yokai was already in her anyway. And just, he thought she was brought back to life, but it was just a temporary moment, and then the head died the next day anyway. It's a very monkey's paw situation because it didn't end up working out. The wife who came back was nothing but a living head. She suffered and died again that night. Wow. And then you see him, and his eyes are kind of wibbly. The Endo family head, the eyes are wibbly like that of Nonuki. And then the mysterious death stopped, along with the bad harvests and diseases. Yeah, he's like, my ancestors sure got unlucky. Here's the thing. Along with it, too, it might have just been the environment causing drought and famine. And it might just be a coincidence that after all that happened, the droughts and stuff stopped. Could just be a coincidence. And people are just assuming it's divine intervention, but it's just a matter of cycles in the weather or whatever. And then they kept worshiping Nonuki and thinking that the beheadings and everything would help it, but it literally is just the atmosphere. I don't know. Something's missing in the story. He's like, nothing ever really happened. He's like, who knows? But we still have the wife's head, which is Hichi. Now, Hichi supposedly protects them when they go to give the ritual. He's like, it's a burden I've got to carry, and it's something we need to tell our kids about someday. So, the sad thing is, I feel like Yoshiki's dad liked Kohei and was gay and liked Kohei. But I feel like Kohei himself was not gay. And he was just friends with Yoshiki's dad, and that's just the tragedy of it, right? Now, do we think that Hikaru was gay? Honestly, after this episode, I feel like Hikaru cared about Yoshiki and maybe loved him like in a queer platonic way, but loved him. But I don't think that Hikaru, in my opinion, based on what we saw in this episode, I don't think that Hikaru, the OG one, romantically or sexually loved Yoshiki like Yoshiki loved him. That's just my opinion. Now, do I think that the OG Hikaru cared about Yoshiki in like a queer platonic way? I definitely do. Especially when he died, because he wanted to make sure that Yoshiki was safe. But I don't know if he romantically liked him, right? But then again, he could have been bisexual. We don't know, and he may not have known about Yoshiki. That's why the men of the Endo family apologized and begged the god to stay up there. And that's the story of their ritual. But Kohei fought with the elders, hoping to end the ritual with his generation. He argued that Nonuki was not what they thought it was, and the ritual was meaningless. He might have been onto something, but here's the thing. So Kohei dies in this accident, which the dad is very much tinfoil hat like, I think the village killed him, right? Because he didn't do because he wasn't keeping up with the ritual. Now, do we think that this entire village is a murder cult? Could be. And that they're trying to be like the village and being like, no, we have to keep our ways. You can't, you're one of us. I think that's very possible. And I think that maybe Kohei was silenced and they were expecting Hikaru to just keep up with what Kohei started. But I love this moment where he's like, was it really an accident? And Yoshiki asks, how did you feel after his dad died? And he's like, I felt like everything good in the village disappeared with him. And that's exactly how Yoshiki feels about Hikaru's death. So him being like, we're more alike than I thought. He's like, you're nothing like me. And I'm like, well, that is two-sided. On the one hand, it's like, I think he's gay like his dad. But I think that he's like, you're going to be able to, you've got your mom's strength and kindness. You're going to be able to leave or move on. You're not going to be stuck here like I am. And he's like, well, you should tell my mom. You'll become a better person than I am. He's like, you should tell mom that yourself. Why won't you talk to her anymore? And he's like, I'm afraid. And you know what? His dad's reasoning is not unfounded. He's like, I'm afraid one day I won't belong in this house anymore. Because honestly, that's the scary part about it from the dad's perspective is his wife, whether she knows now that she thinks that he's gay or not, how would she feel? Because she's an outsider that's been brought to live in this village that doesn't like her. They don't like her. They talk behind her back all the time and talk shit about her. And how would she feel if Yoshiki's dad, if Toshi came and told her like, hey, I've been gay this whole time. It would make their marriage be seen in a different light. It would make her be ridiculed by the village. It would make him be ridiculed. It would make their kids be even more ridiculed. It would open up this whole speculation. Does it mean their marriage is a lie? How does that work? So when he's like, I'm afraid one day I won't belong in this house anymore, the dad is talking about this idea of when we need something, we become desperate for it. And desperate people do dangerous things. So he's like, I don't want to get to that point of desperation. So I just choose to be indifferent and let it kind of simmer. Because he's like, I don't want it to boil over. Because he, as someone who's gay, he knows how this village is. He knows how not accepted he will be, even as somebody part of it. And he further knows his wife, like how ostracized she will be. So he's like, it's better for me to just suffer in silence and distance myself than to come to terms with reality and face the consequences of that. And he doesn't want that for Yoshiki. And luckily, I don't think Yoshiki is going to deal with it the same way that his dad does. So, and Yoshiki's like, that's pathetic. Is belonging really that important? And he's like, yeah. He's like, folks, he says, folks tend to crave what they don't have enough of. And he's like, folks are desperate enough to belong, probably never had a home to begin with. And so that's kind of the thing too, is that we get to talking about Unuki or Nonuki, and that it has this intense desire. It has this desire to belong that it's, become cognizant of, but it also has to fulfill requests. Or has this desire to fulfill requests. And so that's the part that's weird. I think that's the part that Yoshiki's like, wait a minute, why do you feel the need to fulfill requests? What's happened? What's caused that? Because you weren't doing it before, so why now? And he's like, I should make more of an effort to talk to your mom, huh? And he's like, yes, you should. He's like, you got a lot of books, I'm going to borrow some. And he's like, I do have books. I like the sister's like, hey, big bro and dad are actually talking. And she's like, he's quick to put on a good face around you kids. I do think the mom is like, look, we got a lot of complications. And she's like, yeah, good for him. But I feel for her, and I would want Toshi to talk to her and be honest with her, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. Then we have all of these broken bugs. We instantly cut to all these broken bugs and the cicada shells and everything busted. That should have been a foreshadowing of what was to come with Hikaru. Should have been foreshadowing. He's like, it sounds like tons of people offered up their lives to me. Which that would feel so weird, right? And he's like, it kind of makes sense. He's like, but apparently that's just what I am. And then he sees Yoshiki's head as one of the offerings as well. So that's the question. I feel like Hikaru is scared that Yoshiki's going to end up getting hurt on his behalf. And he's like, I don't want that to happen. Because he imagines one of the heads transitioning to Yoshiki's. And then that's when, the mom shows up. He looks a lot like the mom. Honestly, he does. She has like the way his eyes kind of are and his mouth and his face. He's a lot like her. And the little fuzzy hair. So meanwhile, Yoshiki's being Bruce Wayne over here and, killing off villages to bring a woman back to life. And honestly, Yoshiki's smile there when he's like, now they're forced to take responsibility and go apologize for it. It's kind of like, it's weird to see Yoshiki getting all fired up about this. He's like, half a village was killed, or a third, to bring a woman back to life, and now they have to take responsibility and go apologize every year for it. And it says, Endo triggers mass death. But there's something missing. He's like, something's odd. The area was plagued by disease since long, long ago, and they have official records of it. The fact that it stopped after the mass deaths means that all the impurities causing the diseases went away. Okay. So whatever happened, it was whenever they went to bring her back and the impurities, after there was this mass death, then all the impurities left. So I don't know if maybe Unuki if the impurities had plagued people and were starting to all act out in unison, like this big event happened, like a full moon and all these impurities decided to all act at once, and it just happened to coincide with the night that the Endo man took the wife's head up to the mountain to pray for him to come back to life. Or if some kind of exorcism, some mass exorcism, or maybe Nonuki saved everybody all at once and then they all assumed the wrong thing because of it. Something is off. He's like, but shouldn't Hikaru, wouldn't Nonuki-sama? I like that he quickly corrects. I like that as much as we like calling Hikaru, it's Nonuki. So I like that he's recognizing Nonuki as a separate being. Wouldn't he prevent the bad stuff from happening around the village? Why didn't he that night? Isn't he a lightning rod to draw the impurities to the mountain? So why didn't that work? Why was that night different? He's like, make it make sense. What was Nonuki doing before the mass deaths then? Yeah. Why did he only show up before that Hichi fiasco? It never granted any requests. So whatever happened that night feels like it caused Nonuki to appear. So why is that? I wonder, this is a weird idea, but it kind of goes, if we're talking about queer discussions and things like that, what if Nonuki, if the whole spirit itself is from the wife? What if it's her spirit that after the husband requested her to come back, what if she, in that night, like, there was this, I don't know how to describe it, but what if the spirit that was left protecting the village after that night of all that mass death and everything is Hichi's spirit? And the reason why, if you have the head, you're not attacked is because it's her and she recognizes it. And she's like, oh, that's my head. I'm not going to attack you. I wouldn't attack myself. But over time, she forgot her identity and was just this spirit roaming the forest, preventing any more impurities from hurting others like she was hurt. And then the Endo family are spared because they're the ones that, tried to bring her back to life. I don't know. It would kind of be cool because there's a lot of discussion sometimes in BL about like the binaries of male and female. And if the entity, if Nonuki is actually a feminine spirit, that would be interesting, but I don't know. It'd be interesting. And it's like you have a lot of trans discussion, stuff like that. There's a lot you can do with that. I don't know. But it's interesting. I'm going to be curious to find. He's like, is that a request? A god who grants requests. Nonuki-san to Nonuki-sama or Hikaru grants requests in exchange for a head. But why? Why is that? Yeah, there's something missing we don't know about. He's like, I don't get it. Was Hichi special? That's a good question too. Why are there impurities here in the first place? That's a great question too. He's like, we need to figure this out. Otherwise, Hikaru's going to go back to the mountain. He's like, no, we're not going back to the closet. We're not going back. We've already opened up Pandora's box. We're not doing that. We're not going to let that happen. Then this book on guns falls down. But there's also Raffanelli's art book. I want to look up Raffanelli. Raffanelli. Let me see what we got about Raffanelli. Raffanelli, the artist. Okay. Give us information about, says Raffanelli art book. I want to see this. Is it more Renaissance? 1500s? Okay. Okay, there's like a modern Oh, is it Raphael? What? Interesting. I guess it is Raphael. Okay. He's like, oh, these are nice paintings. So we're going to get into this because he's looking at the paintings from the 1500s and seeing all the artwork. And then there is one that it looks like Hikaru, Gehenna. So, Gehenna. Okay. Oh, buddy. Gehenna is a biblical toponym that was acquired as a place of divine punishment in Jewish eschatology. Oh. Huh. Why is this a place of divine punishment? What we getting? What are we getting? The Valley of Hinnom is a New Testament Greek word referring to a physical valley south of Jerusalem, symbol of place of torment, hell, or eternal punishment, due to its history of child sacrifice and later used as a municipal garbage dump. Jesus used Gehenna as a metaphor to describe God's ultimate judgment on evil and as a warning of destruction for a life of sin and unfaithfulness. Oh, that's cool. Okay, a symbol of judgment. The idea of Gehenna being this idea of a judgment or a reaper essentially is fitting for Hikaru. Okay. Huh. Interesting. From 1519. But it looks like, yeah. So is this an actual sketch? Is it an actual sketch? I want to find out if it's an actual one. Do 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 do. Is it? Is it? I don't want to get into spoilers. I don't want to get into spoilers, so I don't know. Interesting. A sketch of Gehenna. Damn it. I can't get into any more research without it, but... So, Hikaru being this deity that is tied to this idea of judgment and punishment and child sacrifice. Well, what if Hikaru, or the entity Nonuki, because, okay, they were talking about the medicine in the last episode and it was like an abortion drug, right? What if the spirit itself is, because it is very childlike. The spirit is very childlike when it inhabits Hikaru, the OG Hikaru, and doesn't know, because that's been something that's been kind of interesting the entire series, is that the spirit inhabiting Hikaru is very childlike and doesn't seem, even though it's been around for hundreds of years, it doesn't know how things work, doesn't understand that. And so what if Nonuki is actually a spirit that it's the spirit of a child, like an unborn child that's been roaming around, and it's making, and the people have been sacrificing all these heads and everything. But an unborn child, a child is tied to innocence, which is tied to purity, which is tied to, not having any evil attached to it. So if Nonuki was created out of the spirit of an unborn child, and it's been watching over this mountain and drawing impurities to it and getting rid of them, because it itself is this pure soul and spirit, that would kind of make sense. What if Nonuki was originally, what if Nonuki is actually connected to the Endo family, and it was like her unborn child when she died and her head was cut off, and he didn't know that she was with child? That could be. He didn't know she was going to have a child. And Nonuki is that spirit, and that's why it protects the Endo family, because it's its own family. I don't know. Things to think about. So, Takeda, but it's Takad instead of Ed, so maybe it's a different Takeda. It's not the Takeda related to, it says right now, he's somewhere else. So, the guy that got possessed and fought Maki is out of the picture. Meanwhile, Asako is asking about the day that Yoshiki and Hikaru skipped choir. So basically the day that Hikaru got stabbed. And she's like, well, they're back at school, so it's nothing to worry about, right? And she's like, well, maybe, but she's worried something went on that day, which girl has a right to be worried because it did go on that day. Then we come back to Little Mermaid, which this looks like the old German Little Mermaid story, not the Hans Christian Andersen version. And I don't know if you've read the original Little Mermaid, but it does not end happily. Sorry, I'm about to spoil a story that's hundreds of years old. But the Little Mermaid, not the The Little Mermaid, not the actual Disney movie, is if we go back to the actual story, the original title, it's a Danish fairy tale, but by Hans Christian Andersen in 1837, talks about, basically it ends pretty sadly. The mermaid ends up sacrificing it. Basically, long story short, we're going to get to the end of it. It says the mermaid heart is broken. She despairs, thinking of death that awaits her. She basically, in the original Little Mermaid, if you've watched the Disney version, where at the end Ariel stops the wedding between Prince Eric and Ursula, who's disguised herself, that doesn't happen in the original version, and the prince ends up not falling in love with her in return and marrying somebody else, and she's like, well, that sucks. And so, she despairs, thinking of the death that awaits her, and before dawn, her sisters in the original story rise out of the water and bring her a dagger that the witch gave them in exchange for their beautiful hair. If the mermaid kills the prince, then she'll become a mermaid again and her suffering will end. And she'll live out a full life in the ocean with her family. But if she cannot bring herself to kill the sleeping prince lying with the princess, then she'll have to die. So basically, this is kind of like Hikaru. I wonder if Hikaru takes Yoshiki's soul, would it be able to, go back to the mountain and go back to things as normal? But that's not going to happen. So in the original story, she can't kill the prince, and instead she sacrifices herself and turns into sea foam. And it says because of her sacrifice, she's given the chance to do good deeds for all of her life. She receives her soul, rises up, and her life ends. So it seems like Hikaru is kind of in that mindset of, instead of sacrificing Hikaru, he's going to sacrifice himself and try to save the village that way. But it gets more complicated as the episode goes on. But I'm like, Hikaru, don't do that. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks for finding that out. He's like, did you ask your dad about it? He's like, it says chickens tastier than people, said the queen. So in this little storybook he's reading, the little beast monster there, which is very Hikaru-esque, is like, what should I eat, people? And she's like, no, have this chicken instead, which kind of ties to the story and the marinated chicken, right? He said, what kind of person was Hikaru? And the thing is, Yoshiki's already told him the answer to this question. But what Yoshiki doesn't say is that he said it in the last episode. He's like, I don't want you to be human. I want you to be you. And I know that Hikaru knows that. And he's like, well, I could give you back this piece. But I kind of love that Hikaru rejects it. He's like, no, I don't want that back. He's like, it may just end up getting lost anyway. It might not do any good. He's like, I want you to keep it. Now it's Hikaru's turn to be given all the red flags, like, giving away things to people is a sign of things not going well. And, my heart broke for him when he started crying in front of Rie. My heart broke for this monster, this little eldritch being that's like, it doesn't want to go back in the woods and be alone anymore. But in the same vein, it doesn't understand why it has this lust for Hikaru's soul or Yoshiki's soul. And you can tell he's conflicted about it. And when Yoshiki's like, I'm not going to stab you. He's like, I'm not going to hurt you. And he accepts him. Hikaru was like the main character of a manga. He could run fast. He sucked at schoolwork. He, had friends and people against him. He's like, he had lots of girls that had a crush on him, but he'd work himself up wondering if they were going to ask him out. And then they'd ask out somebody else. Before he died, he had a thing for Saito in Class B because she looked like Rin-Shan from Master Master. And I feel for Yoshiki in these flashback moments because you could tell, Yoshiki was kind of suffering in silence because he clearly liked Hikaru romantically, but Hikaru was giving no indication of feeling the same way. So in that respect, I kind of feel like there's hope for monster Hikaru and Yoshiki to have this like queer platonic relationship. I like the gay ace dynamic. But we got to get there first. And I don't think we're getting there in season 1. I don't think we're getting there in season 1 because Hikaru is having this moment. And then when he talks about how the OG Hikaru slept through movies, the new one does not. He was wide awake watching and crying through the movie. He ate any kind of food as long as it was edible. But this monster Hikaru has his favorites. He's like, he was always strong and never stressed like I did. But I never saw him shed a tear. I wonder if he actually wanted to cry, and then we see him dead. I feel like he did. I feel like the OG Hikaru was strong not only because he had his own insecurities and fear, but he was also strong for Yoshiki's sake. And I kind of like the dynamic that we have now where Yoshiki is having to be strong for Hikaru's sake. I really like that. And then we get the shot of Yoshiki looking back at him. And in the flashback, Hikaru is clearly sad. But then he looks over and sees Yoshiki and like, oh, I didn't want you to see me like this. And he's like, do you miss him, the real Hikaru? And he's like, well, of course I do. He's like, of course I do. And he's like, oh, well. He's like, yeah, you do. It makes sense. And the thing is, there's the line, the monster pondered. It's like Hikaru's like, I don't understand what it's like to miss someone. He's like, I don't understand these feelings. I don't understand what it means to be human. And I don't really want to be human. But he's like, it's hard to understand how you all think. And then he's like, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. I'm trying. And then what does he say there? What does he say there right before he has the moment? Because he's like, I'm trying, but I mean... And then he has this relapse moment. I think it's because Hikaru is so sad and he's doubting himself. And I think that his intrusive thoughts allow the monster to kind of go crazy in that moment. That whole, like, it's like the monster's trying to repair itself, but it kind of goes berserk in this moment. That part where he was just, like, glitching out like a damn missing no from Pokemon, I was like, oh no. Because then he sees that soul, and then he like the part where his whole mouth moved really quickly and it was just garbage and gibbly boop. Nope. Yeah, and Yoshiki's like, what do I do? In that moment, he kind of just fizzles out and has to reboot. That look of Hikaru where he's just entity and it's just pouring out of him is terrifying. And then Yoshiki freaking out. He's like, I'm freaking out in this moment. I don't really think of this moment as necessarily sexual, but it's not like episode 3. I think it's him trying to get closer to him. Now, you could maybe interpret this as a moment of desperation with the entity trying to like make a last ditch romantic move to kind of save their relationship. But I don't think that the context really calls for it. And he's like, please don't kill me. But then the entity is around Yoshiki, but it's not trying to hurt him. He's like, this doesn't feel gross at all. He's like, is it because of how bad I'm mixed now? He's like, Hikaru. And that's when he talks to him and Hikaru's reaching for his soul, but then he pulls away. Yeah. So, I mean, we have kind of established that the spirit Nonuki is lonely and wants to be connected with someone. And the soul inside Hikaru's body, as far as we know, is gone. So he doesn't have that soul to connect to. So he keeps reaching out to Yoshiki's soul to try to connect to it. But in the same time, him connecting to it could kill him. So what do we do in that moment? Now, the big question as well is, what did Asako see? Did Asako see this and then freaked out? Like, what all did she see? Because she clearly was affected by it. Because she was like walking out in the rain. She looked like she'd been possessed, but I don't know if she really was or not, or if she was just like, And he's like, it's okay, Hikaru. But Hikaru, I don't blame Hikaru for freaking out, and I'm kind of glad that he's like, I tried to hurt you. And Yoshiki's like, you didn't hurt me. But I don't blame Hikaru for being scared, because he doesn't want to hurt Yoshiki. And he's like, well, that's not true. And then when Yoshiki grabs for his damn hand, I felt so bad for Hikaru this episode. He's like, this whole time he looked human. He looked like Hikaru, and that's why I accepted him. But I'm also like, Yoshiki, you've always loved monsters. So you were ready to accept him regardless of if he looked like Hikaru or not. Let's be real. He was ready to accept him because he's always liked monsters. And he's like, even something like him should have a place to belong. Because Yoshiki can relate, because he's queer too, and he wants a place to belong just like Hikaru, just like Nonuki. So I think that the place to belong is with Yoshiki. It's just they're going to have to work through how that works and what that looks like. But he looks at all of these people who are in couples talking with one another. That's what it's going to have to be. And I like that the series is talking about relationships this way, because relationships are hard. They are difficult. They are not easy at all. And even no matter what kind of relationship you're in, queer, heterosexual, platonic, familial, whatever, relationships are difficult. But people, it's often people are where you belong, not just a place. And so I feel like Yoshiki and Hikaru's struggle, well, first of all, the struggle is going to be convinced Nonuki / Hikaru that Yoshiki's okay to be with him, because there's several parties that don't believe that that's true. And that's going to be a big juggling hassle to go through. But also it's going to be the two of them figuring out, how do we move forward together and be a place where each of us can belong, and how do we navigate that? He's got to have a home somewhere. Okay, and do we see them walking with the umbrellas there by Yoshiki as he goes through? But yeah, that's interesting. And he grabs the mark there somewhere. So they go by the high school, and that's when we see Asako and her. And she's just kind of stunned in that moment. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe she's not possessed. She's just kind of horrified in that moment. I guess I think that maybe Asako seeing them like that, if they have to run away and leave later, Asako's going to understand, like, oh yeah, they had to go. Maybe that's kind of foreshadowing that. But anyway, so Rie has Hikaru over. I loved this scene. I loved this scene of Hikaru there. And it broke my heart of him just breaking down. He always has his security blanket over him. He always has his security blanket over him to help keep him safe. She's like, when something from their world gets inside of him, then what the mix says, some of their elements will get mixed into his soul. So it happened to my son too. Her son is Tanaka. There is no question in my mind that her son is Tanaka. No question. Nope. And so part of the entity that was with the dad is taken as like mixed with his soul. When that happens, the boundary between our worlds will get fuzzy. That attracts a lot of impurities. So which that probably explains why Tanaka is an exorcist, why he's working for the company, all of that. Which Hikaru, he doesn't want Yoshiki to be in danger, but I'm also like, Yoshiki's kind of up for it. So that they're within arm's reach, and that is what makes them want to get closer. Yeah, he's like, will something bad happen if he gets mixed in even more? And she's like, I don't want to think about it. She's like, he's like, even if I can fathom what a soul is, I don't understand the value of life. Love, friendship, family, all that stuff. Humans are complicated. He's like, I can't comprehend what all that really means. But Yoshiki told me something. He said I didn't have to understand, that I don't have to become human. He's like, that's why I don't want to hurt him. But it's getting tough, and sometimes I can't control myself. And she's like, well, maybe it's because it's your instincts, and it's like a weakened animal, and it's lashing out. My instincts could take over and mess up Yoshiki's soul. And she's like, one wrong step and he'll wreck everything. He's like, would it solve everything if I returned to the mountain? Would that reduce the impurities and keep everyone safe? And I like that Rie's like, oh, well, I did suggest that, a few episodes ago, but it's not going to get to the heart of the problem. She's like, yeah, you could go back to the mountain, but it's kind of too late now. That's not going to really solve what's going on. Did I say that? And then poor Nonuki Hikaru, him just like saying it's fine, and him doing the peace sign that Hikaru does. And then just like, it's no big deal. But it is. And I felt so heartbroken for him. Like, he wants to keep Yoshiki safe, but they need to figure out why Hikaru is acting the way that he is. They've got to figure out what that one part of this that's not being explained. They need to figure that out. And I don't think they're going to do it by next episode. I don't think they are. I think they're going to leave us on a stupid cliffhanger. And I'm going to be really pissed. He's like, Hikaru, he's like, why? Ugh. Like, My Guitar Gently Weeps plays during this entire series. Now, Rie contemplates if she could yank it out of his body. She's like, both of them would suffer either way if I don't. But I kind of like that she doesn't do it because I'm sure she wasn't thinking of asking for Yoshiki's consent because him and Hikaru are besties. But her whole thing is she's like, I honestly am glad she doesn't because it's like, you don't know what's going to happen if you yank that out. You don't know what would happen. So I'm glad she didn't just do it on a whim. And now she's sitting there and she has a flashback. He's only been in this world for a year, if that. It's too unfair. And she's like, a little longer. And then we see it's so Tanaka. Her son there, that soft-heartedness. That's definitely Tanaka, 100%. It'll lead to even greater suffering. But she's like, I know. But I'm sure Hikaru has a family. Yep, waiting on him to come back home. I like that it almost looks like a broken home there in the picture, and there's the two of them there. I think she realizes in that moment that Hikaru, OG Hikaru, does have his mom still, and she's like, I can't go to their house with a dead kid's body to this widow. And she's like, what kind of mom would I be doing that? So that all makes sense of why she's like, no, that's not how this works. Iori. Yeah. Kurebayashi. Iori. Which Iori could easily change their name to Tanaka. Easily. Yep. I like the potato with the bow. It's so weird. Yeah. She's like, somebody came to the door. But here's the thing. And you're like, oh, it's you. So this person is the person in charge of the company. Are they? How does Rie know them? Why are they there? What's going on? I want answers to that next week, but I don't know if we're going to get that or not. Even if all this research helps figure out what I am. Hikaru's like, it won't change the fact that I'm a monster. I want Yoshiki to tell Hikaru next week that he cares about him even if he is a monster. I want him to tell him that. He's like, I care about you even if you are a monster. We're going to run away together. I need that to happen before the season's over, and I don't know if it will or not. This show is making my heart hurt so much. Okay, and Yoshiki's he's like, wanting a place to call home was pure arrogance. I feel so bad for him because I'm like, no, maybe not a place, but a person to call home. Change your boundaries, Hikaru. And she's like, welcome home. And at least right now, he's not going to make the mom feel bad. At least right now, he's like, yeah, I'm home and all this. There's a part of me that wonders if the mom knows, and she's just, pretending to be blind about it as well because she doesn't want to admit things, but I just don't know. And I'm like, show. I've talked for an hour about this. Show. My mind is so scattered because I'm terrified that next week is the last week. And then we have to wait for quite a long time. But hopefully, if you all are into it down below, we will have, at least looking at volume 1, because I have that. I was given that, volume 1 next week. And then after that, if you guys are up for it, if you lads, lassies, non-binary folk are up for it, I would be happy to look at the volumes covering season 1 and talk about the behind the scenes, react to that in November and December if y'all are up for that. Let me know down below if that sounds good to you. So, because I'm doing that right now with like Cherry Magic. I'm looking at the manga and stuff like every month leading up to it. And so far it's got good reception. So I'm curious to know what you all think about that idea too. But the series is so good. But I feel so bad for Hikaru. I want to give him the biggest hug. I want Yoshiki to tell him that he's a monster lover and he's happy about it. And I want them all to run off into the sunset next week. And I don't think that's going to happen. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I feel like I've rambled, so I've probably not thought of things. And if you think of any more down below, let me know. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care. And yeah, next week is going to be the season finale of the summer that Hikaru died. And I'll see you then.